So I'll just open it up to discussion now. John? No, John, you need to unmute. John, you're still your microphone isn't on, John.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
That's it. So it was you, it wasn't me. Okay. And I was asking Liam if it's all right to eat chalky biscuits at the meeting. So I want to say two things. One is to amplify some of the last points that Chris was making. And what I want to amplify is before partition, the overall demand of the revolutionary forces was for self-determination. And then partition came, and it seemed perfectly natural that the demand should be for Irish unity. But in actual fact, this unity demand has been hijacked. And it's been hijacked in two directions. It's been hijacked by the Irish capitalist class, who say, oh, well, we can have a unity of minds. We can have a shared island. There's no need to have unity. And if you were to have a vote for unity, confined to the north, 50% wouldn't be enough, nor would 51%, or maybe 60%. Our unionist brethren have to say they like the idea. And then on the side of Sinn Féin, they say, no, it's just a matter of a border poll. Very soon the British will turn around and say, we're going to have a border poll for some reason that nobody quite understands. And when they've had the border poll, Ireland will be united and nothing else will have changed and everybody will be incredibly happy. So I think that's an important, if you want to advance a revolutionary demand, it has to be the demand for self-determination. Irish unity is a byproduct of self-determination of the Irish people. And it automatically, once you use the word self-determination, you're automatically raising class demands, because in the South, self-determination would be independence from vulture capital, from the ECB and so on. I have another point, but I'll say it after. Let's see if anybody else.
Anybody else? Just those on camera just indicate with their hand, and those off camera just use the icon, the Zoom icon. Yeah, I've got two indications. Dave, first.
Just a question to Chris whenever he wants to come back. What could you say something about the how it stands presently with I suppose what you might call it, the problem with the unionists supporting part of the North which is obviously always is one of the reasons why it was set up on that in a way constructed majority. And that's been the history, which is obviously the major stumbling block, which is the way things are set up, obviously with the loyalist, unionist, mainly Protestant majority. How does that stand now? What's the position of how is that still a major split in the working class? Is that still as alive as ever, or are there weaknesses in it? Maybe you can answer that, Chris.
All right, so that was a question, but I had another indication. I'll let another person come in, Liam.
Yeah, so when the centenary came on my radar, I had this wee project for about a year of looking back at the papers from 100 years ago. And what really stuck out for me was looking at the rhetoric of unionist politicians in the early part of the 20th century, how very, very similar it was to much of what you're hearing today from traditional unionist voice and the DUP about Ulster isolated and enemies on all sides. But the other really striking thing, from our perspective, was at a point when the entire European working class was drawing revolutionary conclusions, following the First World War and the Bolshevik Revolution, with only fleeting exceptions. What should have been the working class vanguard in Ireland, the industrial working class in the north, had completely hitched its wagon to the ideology of British imperialism. And what limited class consciousness it developed was on an incredibly reactionary sectarian basis. We had the rotten prods and the Fenians being driven out of the shipyards and the docks and so on. And that continuity of ideology in the leadership of unionism, I think, has also survived in much of the loyalist working class as well. When I was over in the summer, I took my life in my hands and walked down the Shankill Road one Sunday morning, before people were going to church or getting out of bed. And, it was really striking just how still reactionary and sectarian, and how much of a throwback to the ideas of 100 years ago the murals and the slogans on the walls of the loyalist areas were. And it would be interesting for me to hear from comments from Belfast and the north. Right, to what extent is this supposed new liberalism in the north of Ireland breaking down around the edges of that sectarian hegemony in the Protestant working class?
All right, so we've had a few points made and questions asked. Chris, do you want to come back on anything you've heard so far?
I think what Dave is hinting at is that it's just the numbers game in the north, and will the declining Protestant majority translate into a majority for a united Ireland? And it's not guaranteed at all. As a matter of fact, it seems that there's a substantial part of the Catholic middle class that are quite prepared to support the status quo. And it was some time ago, maybe 12 years, that Peter Robinson was saying that the DUP had to change. If it was going to survive, it was going to have to attract a percentage of Catholic voters who were prepared to do that. Now, ironically enough, one of the options is before the settlement over Brexit is that the North will become some kind of a special economic zone. And there has been a flurry of recruitment in engineering firms and the like locally. I think even finance workers are moving into Belfast, and there's an opportunity there for the Northern economy as a special economic zone to benefit greatly. But the problem for the DUP and the TUV and people like that is that the Unionist Party that's been created in order to stabilise this new stage of partition is more like the Alliance Party. The Ulster Unionist Party tried to reinvent themselves as a camogie club in order to attract the right kind of voters to boost themselves. But I don't think there's too many people buying that. But there is a possibility that the Alliance Party could become more dominant. So I don't think first of all that the vote's going to take place unless the British take an awful rush of blood to the head, you know. And I don't think that even then that a majority for a United Ireland is achievable.
Yeah, John, you want to come in again?
Well, on this specific point, what you've got to remember is that the North was an apartheid state, and a very, very vicious and violent apartheid state. So there was apartheid in jobs, there was apartheid in the rule of law, there was apartheid in housing, and to that extent, the introduction of the Good Friday Agreement was a defeat for the Unionists. Now, that's not the same as a defeat for partition, because the Unionists were never in control of partition. The British were in control of partition. But what happens when the Unionists are somewhat weakened? A lot of young people, want to turn away from sectarianism. Probably the majority. And it's in the sort of intense loyalist areas that doesn't happen. Although one phenomena is that there's a new youth movement who are just as sectarian as in the past, and we're getting done down, we're depraved, and the way to fix things up is to hit our Catholic neighbour over the head and get their stuff. But generally, that sort of hardline sectarianism is more and more confined to the main loyalist areas and not general throughout society. But the thing is, as one element of partition declines, the other things raise up to take its place. And as I say, the main pillar is Britain, that is fighting Europe, claiming it to be over the North. So they've no intention of going anywhere. The Catholic middle class are perfectly content with what they've got, and they've done very well. So they will, quietly in the background, vote for partition. Actually, a very good example of that is one of the local GIA districts carried a nod with 8,000 signatures saying that they couldn't bear the idea of United Ireland being forced on our unionist neighbours. And the third thing is, of course, that the Good Friday Agreement partly represents the Irish bourgeoisie getting rid of the national question. And the majority of them are determined that it doesn't come back. And in fact, that's one of the main factors that's leading to the disintegration of Fianna Fáil. The boys in the West are saying, sure, we'll wrap the green flag around us one more time and get a bit of support. And Micheál is saying, under no circumstances, even if we go under, we're not letting that monster walk the stage again.
All right. So, does anyone else want to come? Yeah, Anne?
Yeah, just a quick point. John referred to the self-determination as an important issue, and I suppose that can be looked at from the point of view of the right choice in relation to women's reproductive rights. And that's centre stage at the moment in relation to the National Maternity Hospital, which there's been a 9-long-year debate and discussion about the ownership and the governance and public ownership of the maternity hospital. And the nuns really have been in the driving seat. And the cover for that has actually come from the Mulvey report, which is, one could sort of say that they are like agents he was an agent for the state almost, in the same way as, in that the various language in it has allowed the government to hide behind the report since 2016 when it was drawn up. And he's a former trade union official. Recently, the HSE rejected the proposed governance structure, but another trade union official, former trade union official, Paul Reid of the HSE, stepped in to sort of say, oh, that's only a point in time. We will be able to overcome those issues and the governance will be sorted out. But the actual report, there's no possibility of that. So Peter Boylan, and in particular, has sort of said, has made that clear, that it is all the issues to do with Mulvey that have been centre stage really in allowing the government to hide behind the report. So it's interesting that two trade union officials, former trade union officials, have pivotal positions in whether the services are secular and run, and it's been paid for 800 million by the state, yet they're prepared to kowtow to the nuns. And the government, of course, as you all know, are happy to go along with that and are just dragging out time. And meanwhile, the costs have skyrocketed. And the same is the case. So the church actually control the health service in good part, and through the voluntary hospitals, the governance, and the same in the education system. So the question of the call for self-determination has a relevance in both of those areas, because it is about people taking back ownership and taking back control. And I suppose the National Maternity Hospital campaign is quite critical in that respect, because it's probably one of the few campaigns that's actually taken that up in a fairly vociferous manner and has attempted to, pursue it by lobbying, but also pursue it by action outside and by building a movement. So that is the reactionary nature of partition, that it has strengthened and emboldened the Catholic Church. And despite the various referendums, they still have an ear to the government, and they still are in a relatively strong position, even though they have been weakened somewhat, but they haven't been dealt any fatal blow. So I suppose one could sort of say you can use that slogan inside of our own campaign, whether how we would do that, but it is actually quite interesting angle to look at, of self-determination.
Okay, so we're 45 minutes in, so I'm just going to go one more round. If anyone who wants to come in, make a point or ask a question. So just indicate with your hand if you're on camera, or use the hand up icon in Zoom. John again.
I don't want to hog the bloody thing, but two things. I agree with Anne. I think we will be able to use the concept of self-determination throughout all sorts of struggles. The only thing I really wanted to say is we tend to miss out of these sort of discussions is just how dependent Ireland is on international developments. So one of the main things about 1916, it was on the edge of a revolutionary wave within the working class. And it was also on the edge of a big split between reformism and revolution. The civil rights movement in Ireland came directly from the American civil rights experience. And everybody knew that. They were doing it consciously, and it also came less directly from the Prague Spring and that sort of thing in Eastern Europe. So where are we now today? Where we are today is that the socialist groups across Europe have been pursuing a more and more reformist drive around broad left parties. And these broad left parties have all fallen in their arse and left devastation behind them. So, but it creates a very unfavorable atmosphere. So the question is, have we come to an end to that long period of reaction? And are the working class starting to move in the other direction yet?
Okay, is there any other indications? Yeah, Orla?
Sorry about that. I was on mute. I forgot. I was just wondering, you're saying towards the end there'd be need for like kind of a program to unite people around, but do you think there's much of a chance of that happening? Or, you know, is there, or is it kind of flat? Like, I do like what John was saying about self-determination, that's being a slogan to unite people around and a concept, because I hear sometimes down here, like they'd be, oh, let's have a poll for national unity. And I'm thinking, yeah, but like, there's nothing inspiring about it in any way, in that you're thinking, why would somebody want to join what we're doing down here with all the problems? And you couldn't really sell it to people. You know, whereas obviously if you were actually making proper demands for change, that'd be a very different setup. Like, it could actually lead to something useful. Anyway, I don't know if I'm being clear at all. I was just wondering, like, if there's any possibility of like a socialist sort of an alliance or something around kind of more revolutionary demands.
Yeah, Dave, you want to come in again?
Just partly on that. I think if I think it's clear if you look at history and recent history that the material conditions for the existence of the North are certainly broken down, haven't they? I mean, the whole with the you know, the idea of the Protestant, you know, what we call a Protestant aristocracy of labor, that is very much broken down in a way, partly due just mere economic circumstances, not necessarily to do with, you know, positive actions of, you know, the peace process and things like that. You know, what you're saying is, if you look at those material conditions, they don't really exist as such anymore. There's actually potentially there is the if there can be more unity within the working class. I know that's an abstract thing, right? How do we get to that, right? But if that can come about, there's certainly potential. Not to have and that doesn't involve a border poll. It involves basically, it's an ongoing process of a weakening of the people's you know, feel that they need this link with Britain, rather than having what they need a link with, you know, the working class power. Now, that power has not been evident in the North for a while. There hasn't been, you know, any big upheaval in working class action. But as far as what we can do as socialists and activists, I think we partly have to have a sense of urgency, but we have to be realistic. And what we need to carry on being activists. We need to support campaigns. If these campaigns aren't directly to do with you know, economic things like Black Lives Matter, and you know, the fights for certain types of you know, those sort of demands, you know, campaigns. But that's what, for example, and I should mention that we're involved in the free Julian Assange campaign, and there's a stall in Belfast City Hall next Saturday, this coming Saturday, 23rd of October. So I would encourage people to join that. So it's those sort of things. We need to be active, but we also need to be making the argument that if the bigger argument about the state, and that is a positive. That's a positive direction, and it's not one that should be ignored. In terms of well, there's nothing we can do. We can campaign about things, but we can't take on the state. Well, that's why we're socialists, because we believe in linking those arguments. And unfortunately, there's a lack of that. There's like there's a tendency to just, for example, for a lot of left parties, for example, in the South, and to sort of say, well, we get a left government, maybe that will be a positive step. It's not about that top down kind of thing.
All right, so if there's no further contributions or questions, I'm going to ask Chris to come back. So just